What is going on, everybody? It is Mike, the professional Dependa, and I'm getting my YouTube channel going back up again. But this is going to be a lot different from what it used to be centered on. I'm still going to do a lot of military spouse stuff, but that is, if you're looking for more military spouse content, check out my podcast, The Professional Dependa. It's on iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, and a few other places. Also, you can check out my socials. I'll have those posted below. But I've recently gotten into sewing. I started a company, Dependa Dog Gear, where I make custom bandanas, I make leashes, and I'm starting to make a few other dog accessories as well. So I thought that I would do more content based on that. There's not a lot of guys that are into sewing, so I kind of want to do some of that and just kind of show what the process is for that. If you're like me, you're like, I'd like to get into sewing. There's some things that I'd like to do, but I'm not sure how to do it. You can follow along with me as I kind of learn how to do some stuff. I've gotten a little better. I've been sewing for about 7-8 months now. I'm getting a little bit better, but I'm still progressing and I'm still learning. So that's really kind of what this is. Now, the way I started off super simple. I started off just learning how to do a straight stitch. And then the first thing I actually made before I made any bandanas was I'm lying. I did make bandanas first. It all starts to run together after a while. So I started looking at bandanas and they're simple, right? It's a triangle. So my first bandanas were just a triangle. Like I cut fabric to length, folded the edges, and stitched it. And that's all I did. And now I've gotten a little bit better about it. I've learned some techniques to kind of make my stitches hold it a little bit better to where I make a better product. I'm a little bit faster at it now, and I've changed the designs a little bit. And I'm still learning, still progressing. But today's video, I think is going to be a little fun because it's kind of multi-use, multi-purpose, I guess. Halloween's coming up. This is spooky season, right? And a lot of times kids get those little cheap plastic bags that they can put their candy in when they go on different trick-or-treat trails and stuff. Couple things. For one, those are usually single-use. They're plastic. You throw them away. They go sit in the landfill somewhere. And two, they're kind of small. Let's be honest. Parents, we want our parent tax. Whenever kids get something good, we want the Reese's, we want the Skittles, we want some of the good stuff out of there. We got to be able to tax that stuff. And the only way that we can get a good tax is if they have a bigger area to store it in. Now, when I was a kid, I always just carried a pillowcase. So that's what I want to do. I want to make Halloween bags for my two kids, but I want to make them out of material that we can later use as a pillowcase. There's a few different ways you can do this. First thing you're going to need is material. So, being that it's spooky season, I found this material. I think it's really fun. It's really bright, really colorful. I think my kids are going to dig it. So that's what I'm going to be making the pillowcase out of. And one thing that I always recommend doing is making a pattern. I'm not going to be making a pattern this time because I think this is a little bit too simplistic for a pattern. But if you do decide to make a pattern out of this or out of anything, go to your fabric store, pick up some tracing cloth. This is thin. You can see how you can see through it. So you can set it down, you can trace on it, you can cut it, you can write on it. You can also iron this. So if you make a pattern, like I've got patterns for my bandanas, if it gets wrinkled, you can iron it. That way you make sure you're getting the same length every time. So I highly recommend this. I'm not going to be using this for I keep saying bandanas because that's what I make the most of. I'm not going to be doing this for the pillowcases, but I am going to use it for this. And this is going to be the next video. So today's pillowcases. Next video, pajama pants. They honestly just kind of look like scrubs. I have never made anything like this before. First time for everything. I have altered a couple of pants for my daughter. She wanted to turn some long pants into capris, and that's what I did. Anyway, that's enough talking. So here we go. And here's how we're going to do this. So I've got my fabric again. I bought 3 yards of fabric. That's probably a lot more than what I'm going to actually end up needing. But again, better safe than sorry. So first thing I did when I got the fabric is I brought it home and I washed it because I didn't want it to shrink later whenever we started using it as a pillowcase and then we washed it after going trick-or-treating. Something that's very important to keep in mind is that most of your yarn, whenever you're sewing, the yarn is already pre-shrunk. So if you don't have pre-shrunk fabric and then you used pre-shrunk yarn and you do end up going to wash it, whenever your fabric shrinks, you might pop some stitches. Might. So anyway, so the first thing I'll do, it's already washed. We're going to iron it. Once I iron it, then I'm going to lay it out and I'm going to cut it. Remember, I'm going to cut mine just over, I'm going to do it like 41 by like 36 and a half. So we're going to iron this and then we're going to cut it. I don't think I want to see me iron. The one thing I will do before I iron is, remember, I washed this fabric beforehand. So as you can see, we've got some strings going from whenever I washed it beforehand. Take your scissors. Make sure you have fabric scissors that are different than scissors you use to cut paper with. I bought these strictly for cutting fabric. And you're just going to go through and just trim off the parts that are kind of stringing out. And you want to use fabric scissors because you want them to be sharper. You don't want to create more runs. So there you go. And be careful not to pull on this while you're doing it. You don't want to create a bigger run in your fabric by sitting there and trying to pull it. And there it is. That's all you gotta do. First thing you need to do is figure out how big to make it. Standard queen size pillowcase is, whenever you look at it. So this is my area that I do a lot of stuff I use from a podcast, so don't worry about that. But having a nice big surface area to cut on is really good. This one's got markers on it. So you can see a standard queen size is just shy of 20 inches wide and just shy of 32 inches long. Now, if I ironed this out, it would probably be 20 by 32. But that is not the true measurement of this particular fabric, because if you'll look right here, you'll see you have almost 4 inches of a hem where they folded it over and sewed it to make it a hem. So it's really 36 inches long. And then the other way they did this is it's actually one giant piece that's folded over, sewn on two sides with the hem. So being that it's 20 inches wide, it's actually going to need something just over 40 inches wide, because you want to give yourself a little bit of margin. That way you can sew your seams, because you're going to have to sew those. You're going to have to sew those edges together. So you're going to need a little space to work with. So being that this is just under 20, I'm probably going to go 41 just to give myself a little bit of room. And then I'm going to do 41 by about 36 and a half, because that'll give me room to fold over and again have that little bit of room to work with. If you're more experienced, then you can probably go with a shorter margin. Again, I'm not that experienced, but I'm having fun and I've learned a couple things, so let's get going. As you can see, I've got it pulled all the way up to the corner here. So from here to here is just over 20 inches. And then from here to here, you see mine stops at 36. So I'm basically going to go to right here where the actual cutting board ends. And I'm just going to slide this whole thing over to the left a little bit. And I'm going to cut a straight line there. So that way I only have to sew here and make my hem here. Now remember I was talking about cutting off that piece that was messed up, or not messed up, but was marked with the manufacturer. This is what happens if you don't cut it close enough. But fabric isn't perfectly square. We're not working with metal here. We're working with cloth. So this really isn't that big a deal. I can go back and I could trim it now if I wanted to, or I could wait until after I cut how much I'm looking for and then trim it. Whatever you're comfortable with, do that. If you don't really care if you have that little bit there, that's fine. Me personally, I'm either going to use that as my folded edge for whenever I go to cut it, because if you look at the way a regular pillowcase is. All right, so I've got this pillowcase folded inside out, so you can see the hem that I'm talking about right here. So this is where they folded it over and they have a straight stitch going right here. But then this is the inside. So that part where the fabric is kind of messed up from the manufacturer's mark, I can just fold that over on the inside, and then nobody's going to see it because it's going to be on the inside. So if you don't want to cut it and you only have that little bit, that's probably 1/8 of an inch, don't worry about it too much because it's going to be on the inside anyway. All right, so we've got it all ironed. Now the first thing we're going to do before we actually start cutting is we're going to cut off this edge right here. It has a name. I don't know what that name is. So we're going to lay it on our cutting board, cutting mat. These self-healing cutting mats are really great to have. as well as a nice wide ruler. I wish I had one that was a little bit longer. This one is 18 inches. It does what I need to do the overwhelming majority of the time. Every once in a while, it'd be nice to have one that's just a little bit longer. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our rotary cutting tool. If you don't have one of these, scissors will work just fine. If you find yourself sewing a lot and cutting a lot of fabric, I cannot recommend a rotary cutting wheel enough. You push the button, the blade comes out. That blade will take you to the hospital if you're not careful. I know a lot of people that have sliced off parts of their finger with one of these little guys right here. This is like a, think of like a really mad pizza cutter that's ready for revenge. That's basically what this is, only it's for fabric. So what we're going to do is we're going to come to the side of our cutting board here. I like coming to the side because then I can just do everything in one fell swoop. I've got the fabric folded over to where that edge that I want to cut off is all lined up together. So all I got to do is put my ruler on it, right up to the edge, a little bit to the left of it, for whatever vantage point you have. It's my left. That way I make sure I get just I don't leave any of that edge. I don't want to leave any of that edge because it's going to look weird when we're going to sew it. So I'm going to take my rotary cutting wheel and I'm going to cut this edge off. And there we go. Don't worry about trying to go through too many layers of fabric. I actually have this folded over like twice. So it's essentially just cutting through 4 layers of fabric with that rotary cutting wheel. No problem at all. Now for cutting this, there's a couple different ways you can go. You can do like I'm about to do, because I don't have a giant table with one of the super huge cutting mats on it. This is the space I have. My table is about 3 feet wide by 5 feet long, which is more than long enough, but there's a wall right here. So I really can't do a huge thing. So what I'm going to do is I've got my fabric folded. I'm going to measure out 20 by just over 36. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 20 inches wide, or 21 inches wide rather, that way I have a little bit more room to work with. And then I'm going to go all the way to the end of my cutting mat. I'm going to hold my spot there. I'm going to pull it back just a little bit so I can cut right there. So that's going to look something like this. And I definitely recommend cutting this on a seam. That way, whenever you cut it, you still have one piece of fabric. So it's going to look like so. As soon as I figure out which way we're going to go with this. Sometimes this is the hardest part, is figuring out which way to fold it. That way you get the seam that you want. Okay, finally figured out which way we're going to fold it. We're going to fold it long ways. So fold it in half. A bolt of fabric is 21 inches wide. And I know this because I bought this off of the bolt, and it measures out to just to 20 and a half inches. Sue me. Don't sue me. I don't have any money. So whenever it's ironed and stretched out, it's 20 and a half inches wide, which is about what I'm looking for. Now, whenever I sew it, I'll have the one edge that I'm not having to sew because it's on the fold, and then it'll be long enough to where I only have to make 2 stitches plus the hem. So this is about right. So we're going to get it all laid out. Now again, don't try to make this thing perfectly square. Fabric is not square, and if you spend all day trying to get it exactly square on here, you're going to go crazy. So get it pretty close. And then if you really want to, you can go back with your ruler later and you can square it up to where you have a perfectly square piece of fabric. I'm not really going to worry about that much right now because, again, there's going to be some folded over edges, and the stuff that's not perfectly square is going to be on the inside. So whenever we have a finished product, everything's going to be straight. So it's not that big a deal. So we're going to take our ruler. Remember, this one's 18 inches. We're cutting 20. So right now I'm just going to use this to mark. So we're going right here. And if you want, you can pin it. I'm probably going to go ahead and do that now. Actually, I'm not going to pin it. I want to use these little clips. These little things are wonderful. You can clip where you're going. Top and bottom. Now, for my working area, just so y'all know what I'm doing over here, I like to keep stuff in the area that I'm going to be using it. So this desk, I do a lot of vinyl cutting and some of my 3D printer prep, which I'll have in future videos. And so I also do all of my cutting and stuff over here. So I have all of my my pins, my clips. I've got pinking shears, which if you want to cut something and have it not fray and not sew it, pinking shears are awesome to have. They've just got little teeth on there that kind of zigzag the edge. I've got a corner turner, so whenever you fold something inside, you can put this in there and get the corners out and have them be nice and square. This is also where I keep my rulers, my rotary cutter, all that stuff. I try to keep it all in the same area. And if I need something I need for my sewing machine, I try to keep that over there by the sewing machine. So anyway, that was just real quick. That was Lanyap from Louisiana. So let's get this thing cut real quick. I've got my edges marked. Now I don't have to worry about where that seam was. So I'm going to go right up to the line here. And the nice thing about having a grid cutting mat is I can get those clips right up to a number, and then I can use my ruler and follow that number line all the way up. So we're going to get this right up to this number so I know that it's straight. Now I have a really good guide to follow, and I don't have to worry about my fingers getting cut off. So I'll take that one out. Right there. That's not exactly where I need it. There, got it. Okay. And there it is. So now we're going to turn this into a pillowcase. I will spare y'all me doing this twice. I'm making 2 pillowcases, one for each daughter. So I will just do this once for y'all, but just know, you just repeat the process. It's going to be the same. All right, so I've got my fabric cut. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it right sides together. What does that mean? When you look at your fabric, you've got the pretty side and then the plain side. So I'm going to put it right sides together. Okay, so we've got our fabric. I've got it wrong side out. What does that mean? The pretty side is on the inside, or the design is on the inside, whatever you want to call it. Now I'm doing this, I'm going to iron it one more time, but then I'm going to unfold it, and I'm going to fold my hem. That way it's going to look like this, and I'm going to do a straight stitch right here. And we're going to go over how to do that on the machine. Okay, so I just had a thought while I was ironing this side of it. We know we need about 3.5 inches for the hem. So it would probably be a better idea to come back over to your cutting board, go ahead and measure out your hem. The way you get a good 3.5 inches, and then pin it. Because one thing that I've learned about sewing, especially whenever you're sewing see, I can't talk. When you're doing a long straight stitch, the fabric wants to move on you. So what you want to do is you're going to want to pin this down to where you have your 3.5 inch seam for your hem, and then you're going to want to iron it so you have this, so you have a nice flat crease right here. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pin this, then we're going to iron this flat, and then we're going to go to the machine. We'll try to see if we can show you how we're going to do this. Now this is another one of those times where having the grid works out, but this is also one of those times where having a good ruler will help you out as well. So we know we need 3.5 inches, but we also know that our fabric is not square. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pull this up to the top, not all the way up, but just up to where it's at the 20. We're just going to use the 21 inch mark. And we're going to fold this down 3.5 inches. And I'm going to use my ruler to where I have a 3.5 inch seam. There we go. So that's at 3.5 inches. And I'm going to grab my pins. All right, got my first pin in. I'm going to just do a couple pins right here so y'all can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to pin the rest of it, iron this seam flat, and then we'll go over to the machine. Okay, now this is my sewing space. Something that's very important that I learned pretty quickly with a sewing space is you want to have a solid table. Even this is a older brother. This is a LX3014. This is a very beginner machine. It's got 14 stitches on it, but half of them are for buttons. And I mean, it just does zigzags, straight stitch, and a couple of stretch stitches. Currently I have this thing set up with white thread and white bobbin thread. That's not going to work with what I'm doing. I want to do black thread. So I want to go over how to thread your machine. If you've never done it before, it can seem intimidating, but I promise you it's not. I can pretty much do this in my sleep now. That doesn't mean I'm the greatest at it, but I've done it a bunch. So the first thing you want to do, we're just going to go with getting the thread out. Open up this thing right here, and then here's the bobbin. I don't know why it's called a bobbin. I don't, but you can trade this out. You know, if you really want to, you can actually do like multicolors. I've seen some really cool stuff where people do different colored stitching with it, and it's really cool. I'm not doing that. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your thread, get it unwound, and if you look at the top of your machine, in theory, all of them have this. I know mine does, and I know the next one that I'd like to get has the same thing. The instructions for how to thread your machine are all on the top. So it shows you right here which way you want the thread to go. You want the thread to go that way. So you want it kind of coming out the back. Put it right there. And then if you look up here, let's see if I can show you. So if you look right here, that is the model that you want to follow for threading your bobbin. So as you can see, you want to come... grab my thread. You want to come around this little knob right here, little bearing. You want to have the part that's going to your bobbin over the part coming from your spool. Now this is your bobbin. This is just they come for different machines. I want to say the brother and the Singer ones work interchangeably because I think this one's actually for a Singer machine, even though I have a brother. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this and you're going to thread it through that hole back there, and we're going to go over that. Okay, so you're going to take this, you're going to take your thread, and you're going to feed it through the hole on your bobbin. Just like that. And when you get it, you're going to want to pull about 6 inches of thread out, and you're going to put it on this little thing right here. You're going to put it right here, and then what you're going to want to do is you're going to slide that over. What happens when you slide that over is that disengages the clutch that's in here. So it's going to stop your presser foot and your needle from moving up and down. And it's only going to operate this. So once you have that, turn your machine on, hang on to this thread. You see I've probably got about 9 inches pulled out right here. And then you're just going to push your pedal, and it's going to start to wind. Now my machine will stop whenever it's got enough thread wound. So we're just going to let this go for a minute. Now, sometimes your bobbin thread won't wind properly, and if you find that it's not going up and down properly, so you can see I'm still pressing the pedal, it's not moving, so that means it's all the way full. But what you can do is if you find that your thread is not winding properly on your bobbin, you can use your hand and just kind of gently guide it to where you get a nice even wind on it. Once you get it done, I like to turn my machine back off just because I don't know, I feel like you're supposed to. Pull the bobbin thread off. Take your fabric scissors, you're going to cut off that extra thread, throw it away, and then you're going to trim off some excess. And now we're going to finish threading our machine. Okay, I'm going to talk through this because it's going to be kind of hard to see. So what you're going to do, remember you're going to follow the diagram that's on the back. And this one, there's a diagram up top up here where it shows this little metal piece. And it has the directions. So this shows coming behind the metal piece. There's actually a little metal guide rod back here. So I don't know if you can see it. There's a little metal guide rod back there, almost like a little metal spring. So you're going to put that in there. You're going to bring this down. You're going to come around the tensioner, back up, And then here is the other hook you need to get it through. Once that's through there, then you're going to bring it down. Okay, so I couldn't get a good angle with it, but there's a little space right here. You want to put the thread, I like to turn it sideways, and then feed the thread through that, and then you're going to thread the needle right there. And I've actually got to change out this presser foot, so let's do that as well. Okay, so the rest of this is going to be kind of hard to see, but I keep all my stuff that I need for sewing in the desk drawer here. There's a button on the back side of this. You press that, the presser foot's going to drop away. Take that out, put the correct presser foot, and then I just drop it. I drop the presser foot down on top of it. I find that to be the absolute easiest way to do it. And then, as I was saying earlier, so take my thread, I turn it sideways to get it through that little tensioner. And then this used to be very difficult for me, but I have found that having a nice clean edge on my thread makes threading the needle a lot easier. And of course, because I'm sitting here saying how easy it is on camera, it's giving me difficulties. When in doubt, lick your fingers, right? There it is. Okay. So you're going to feed it, and then once you get it through, you're going to want the thread to go underneath the presser foot, and then just pull it back. Got a little tied up there on the knot, but there you go. So then I've got, about 5-6 inches pulled back there. Now, for the bobbin thread. The bobbin thread, you're going to want the thread coming out to your right, or whichever direction your bobbin thread needs to go. So then you're going to put your bobbin thread inside the holder, and there's a little groove on the top right there. So you put your bobbin thread in the holder, bring the thread up to that groove, and then just pull it to the side, and it'll come over here to this bigger groove. And then with my machine, you just put it right back in here, push it straight back. Did you hear the click? Once you hear the click, the bobbin is seated properly. Pull the excess up to the side and close that. Now, here's the part that I honestly struggle with a lot. This is the part where I have found I have to have patience. So we're going to put this, it's set to a zigzag right now. We're going to put this to a straight stitch. Probably use, on this one, I'm going to use the number 9. I honestly don't know how long the stitch is. As somebody that sews, I should know how long it is, but I don't. I know it's not the shortest one. The shortest one is like 1 millimeter in length. This is probably like a 2 or 3 millimeter length stitch. But if you have extra thread, you never want to get rid of your extra fabric. Don't get rid of your extra fabric. This is where your extra fabric comes in handy. Because what you need to do is now you need to pick up that bobbin thread. So what we're going to do, we're going to put our extra fabric underneath the presser foot, drop the presser foot, turn on the machine, and I always spin the knob 1 or 2 times towards you. You always spin the knob towards you. Even if you need the knob to the needle to go back up just a little bit, you always spin it towards you. I learned that lesson the hard way as well. Again, that's part of why I'm doing this. A lot of these mistakes are mistakes that I have made and I've learned from. If you spin it backwards, it jacks everything up, I promise you. So once you get going a couple of times, I like to push on the foot and just let it go ahead and stitch all the way through one at a time. That does a couple things. Lift up your presser foot, pull it through. It lets you see that you've got the bobbin thread. So once you've got the bobbin thread, you can just kind of pull it out, and you want to leave a good 5-6 inches of thread. This does a couple things. My machine is really bad about binding up when I swap out the bobbin thread. So by running it through at least a few inches, it lets me see if that bobbin thread is going to be bound up or if I'm going to be good to go. Looks like this picked up pretty good, so we should be okay. I'm going to put this back on. That way I have a little bit more surface area to sew with. Now I'm going to get the fabric and let's get going on that. All right, so we've got our fabric, got it all ready. I've got it pinned, I've got it ironed, it's all ready to go. And I've also got the extra fabric kind of folded up on the side here because I don't have a ton of room to work with, but I have enough to where if I have this kind of folded up, it'll get through my machine just fine. So what we're going to do, sorry I keep kicking the tripod. So we're going to get the fabric underneath and we're going to work about a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. On your machine, there's different lines on there. The second one is usually about a 1/4 inch. The second line actually the first line is 1/4 inch. Again, I'm not an expert by any means. So that first line is about a 1/4 inch. So we're going to work on about a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to get our needle just over our thread here. Make sure that we're lined up on that line. Rotate it forward to make sure that we're in there, and that the feed dogs, I think that's what they're called, the little feet that kind of go with it. So here's what we're going to do. We got it going. We got it lined up. We're going to follow that line all the way down. But we're going to start off with a back stitch. So we're going to go a couple of stitches, press the backwards button, a couple more stitches, let that go, and now we're just going to run it all the way down. That back stitch is going to make sure that we are locked in place, that your thread is not going to come out from the top up there. So now we just sew. Now I've got my needles set up far enough back to where I don't have to worry about running them over, most of them. So as you get to where your needles are, if they're too close to the edge, just pause, pull it out, press on. That one's a little close. That one was also a little close. As we get to the end, I'm going to slow down a little bit, and we're going to do another back stitch. And there we go. Okay, this is also one of those times where having a lot of pins is going to come in handy. So what I did was I started up at the very top where the hem is that we sewed, and I'm just going around like I said, about every 6 to 8 inches, pulling my fabric a little tight, and I'm just putting a pin to make sure my fabric doesn't move while I'm stitching. Sewing, pretty sure if you call it stitching, it means something else. But, so I want to make sure I get one down here close to the corner. That way whenever I make the turn, it doesn't go anywhere. And normally I would be doing this on my cutting mat, but I really don't have anywhere good to put my camera, so we're just going to go right here. Use the ironing board. There we go. About 10 pins all the way around. And now we're just going to do a straight stitch all the way around with a couple back stitches, and let's see how that looks. This is where you have a few more options. Now, if you're just using this, as I am, as just a regular trick-or-treating bag, pull the pins out while I'm talking to you, then you can probably be done. Honest and true. You could be done right now. You could also probably be done even if you were using this as a pillowcase. However, what I like to do is I like to make sure that my seam isn't going to come apart on me later down the line. So, and that this edge is less likely to fray. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over it with a zigzag pattern. Now, if your machine has a lightning bolt pattern, then that would probably be a little bit better. Or if you are experienced and you've been doing this for a while, you have a serger, this is one of those times where you could go through with a serger or an overlock, and it's going to overlock that seam. It's never going to come apart, and it's also going to trim your edges for you. I don't have an overlock or a serger. I've got the one sewing machine. So I'm going to set it to a zigzag pattern, and I'm going to go back over it with that. And I'm going to do where I've kind of go over the straight stitch that I've already done, but a little bit ever. And then once I get a little bit extra on there, just to strengthen it, then I'm going to trim off the excess. Let me show you how that looks. All right, so we're going to go over here. I'm going to set this to zigzag. I'm not going to set it to the smallest zigzag. I'm going to set it to a number 3. Now, it's important to remember with the zigzag pattern, you cannot do a back stitch. So remember that. You can do a back stitch with a straight stitch, not with a zigzag. So we've got our zigzag set up. And I'm basically going to follow my straight stitch. So I've got it set up right now to where the needle is a little bit to the right of my straight stitch. That way, whenever it comes down, it's going to overlock that stitch. So basically, my straight stitch is going to be right in between it.
And I'm just going to reverse what I did. I'm going to start the short side, leave the needle down, turn it in the middle long side.
And there you go. So this is the final product looks like after you're done sewing. And this is super easy. You open up your pillowcase, reach inside, turn it right side out. This is also where you can, this is big enough to where you can just reach inside and push your corners out, like I just did. Or if you want to have a seam turner, which is just a piece of plastic like I showed you earlier, you can reach in and do it. But this is good enough where I can just reach in and do it. And there you go. Now you have a queen size pillowcase that is unique because you made it, and your kids can have something that's trick-or-treating and it's reusable. It's not just one piece of plastic you throw away later. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. These are fun for me to make because I like to share information, and I'm looking forward to learning and sharing with y'all what I'm learning. The next video is going to be those pajama pants. That is going to be a 100% learning experience. I've never sewn anything like that before. So y'all will be able to see firsthand all of the mistakes that I make, or if I make any at all. I've picked up some tips and tricks because I've watched a lot of videos from people that are a whole lot smarter than me. Like Tot Customs, I learned a lot from his videos. He makes some really awesome beginner style stuff. And he's the one that I learned how to read patterns from. So, and a few other things. I've picked up a lot from Tot Customs. So if you're not following him, go check him out. But thank you. Subscribe to the videos. Go check out my podcast, The Professional Dependa. This is Mike from, I think I'm going to call this Dependa Designs. Instead of having Professional Depend on all of it. So if you like Dependa Designs, let me know. Drop a comment, drop a like. Thank y'all so much for watching. Y'all have a great day.